Hi guys, time to talk about rational numbers. A rational number is any number that can be written in fraction form. The one exception is that you cannot have a denominator of 0 in a fraction. So you're looking for numbers that can be written in this form, a over b with a numerator and a denominator, but b cannot be 0. So what are some things that qualify as rational numbers? Well, positive whole numbers are rational because any positive whole number can be written over 1, like 4 can be 4 over 1, so it's in fraction form. Negative whole numbers, like -6, can also be considered rational because same thing, we write them over 1, so -6 over 1, it's in fraction form. Mixed numbers can be considered rational numbers because I just take my denominator, 3, multiplied by my whole number, 2, plus my numerator, 2. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 2 is 8, and I have 8/3, an improper fraction. Decimals that end, we call them terminating decimals. Decimal that ends, a terminating decimal. Any decimal that comes to an ending point, like -0.25 can be written in fraction form. It's actually -1/4. Decimals that have a pattern that repeats, like 1.666666666, on and on. This bar notation here tells me that 6 keeps going. Decimals that have a pattern that repeats can be written as fractions too. So this guy would be 1 2/3, which could then be written as 5/3. So it's in our AB form. So as just stated here, a terminating decimal is a decimal that has an ending point. These are rational numbers. And repeating decimals, decimals with patterns that repeat, they're also rational numbers. So sometimes we can see a repeating decimal with the ... at the end. That's a signal that it keeps repeating, it keeps going. And if we notice there's a pattern there, we can write it with the bar notation. So let's talk about taking some fractions here and writing them as decimals. So we're converting our rational numbers into a different form. So I've got -2 1/4 there, and we want to write it as a decimal. So the first thing I'm going to do is take -2 1/4 and change it into an improper fraction. So it's going to become -9/4. So once I've done that, I'm going to actually do long division to put this into decimal form. So my numerator is always going to go on the inside here. So I did 9 divided by 4. 4 went into 9 twice, and I did 2 times 4 is 8. My leftover was 1. Brought down my 0. You can always add a decimal and a 0 to keep your long division going. 4 goes into 10 twice. That would be 8 with 2 leftovers. I brought down another 0. 4 went into 25 times. So now I have a remainder of 0. I can stop my long division. So -2 1/4 is equal to -2.25. So let's try one together here. So we've got 5/11ths. So this one's already written in that a over b form. So my numerator is going to go on the inside, my denominator on the outside. And right away, 11 does not go into 5, it goes in 0 times. So to keep my long division going, I'm going to add a decimal and a 0. Now 11 goes into 50, a total of 4 times. 4 times 11, 44. 6 leftovers. I'll add another 0 and bring it down. 11 goes into 60 5 times. It's 55. 5 leftovers. I'll add a 0. I keep going until I have a remainder of 0. 11 goes into 50 4 times. 44. Remainder 6. I'll add a 0 and bring it down. 11 goes into 60 5 times. The only exception to this getting a remainder 0 is if we notice a pattern emerging. And here I see a pattern. It's going to keep going. 0.45, 45, 45. So 5/11ths is actually worth 0.45. And since the 4 and the 5 keep repeating, I'm going to put a bar over them. Now what if we want to do the reverse? What if we want to take a decimal and turn it into a fraction? Well, this is where it becomes important to remember how to correctly read your numbers. So over here, I've got negative 0.26. But if I read that correctly, this is negative 26 hundredths, because this 6 ends in the hundredths spot. So negative 26 hundredths, if I say it correctly, is exactly how I'm going to write it in fraction form. This place value at the end becomes my denominator. And then this guy can be reduced by dividing by 2. If I cut them both in half, I get 26 in half is 13. 100 in half is 50. I don't forget to bring my negative over. Negative 13 fiftieths is the reduced fraction that is equal to negative 26 hundredths. So let's try another one. Here we have 3 and 125 thousandths. So the 3 goes out front. This fractional part here, the 125, is my numerator, and it ends in the thousandths spot. So 1,000 is my denominator. Then I want to reduce here. 125 and 1,000, both are divisible by 125. So I'm going to carry over my 3. 125 divided by 125 is 1, and 1,000 divided by 125 is 8. And there's my reduced fraction. All right, last but not least, let's look at a word problem here. We have a table that shows the elevation of 4 sea creatures relative to sea level. I notice they're all negative because they're all below sea level. They want to know which creatures are deeper than the whale. So the whale here is written as a decimal. So I'm going to convert these other animals into decimals. So the anglerfish was at a depth of negative 13 tenths. So the numerator always goes on the inside. 13 divided by 10. 10 went into 13 once. I had 3 leftovers. So I added a decimal and a 0 and brought it down. Now I had 30, and 10 goes into 30 3 times. No leftovers. So the depth of the anglerfish is negative 1.3 kilometers. The squid was at negative 2 1/5 kilometers. So this guy changed to an improper. He became negative 11 fifths. The 11 goes on my inside, 11 divided by 5. So I did my long division here, and I got 2.2. So the squid, who was at negative 2 1/5 kilometers, is at negative 2.2 kilometers. Now the shark. Let's do this one together. So the numerator always goes on the inside, divided by 11. Okay, 11 will not go into 2, so right off the bat I start with a 0. I'm going to add a decimal and a 0. 11 goes into 20 once, a leftover of 9, and I'll bring down a 0. 11 goes into 90 8 times, remainder 2, I'll bring down a 0. 11 goes into 20 once, 9 leftovers. 11 goes into 90 8 times, and I'm starting to notice there's a pattern here. So negative 2 elevenths is actually going to be equal to negative 0.18 repeating. I'll put the bar notation there to signify that the 181818 continues to repeat. So now let's take a look at these guys. We want to know which sea creatures are deeper than the whale. So the whale is at negative 0.8 kilometers. So the anglerfish is at negative 1.3. 1.3 would be below 0.8. So the anglerfish is below the whale. The squid is at negative 2.2. That's definitely deeper than negative 0.8. So he's also deeper than the whale. And last but not least, we've got the squid. He's at negative 0.18. That is actually not as deep as the whale at negative 0.8. So the shark is actually above the whale.